Uh,
Hey, happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to Battle Lines. I am your host, RC3, and with me today, my co host.
Hi, good morning. This is Myra. Or good evening.
And so we have a fantastic show for you guys today. Obviously, it's been a historical week with the passing or with the overturning, excuse me, of Roe versus Wade. We're going to get into a discussion about the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Also, we wanted to talk about the gun legislation that Joe Biden just signed into law. And we have another story for you guys, but then we're going to share our opinions on things that we find interesting this week in politics and culture. So I'm glad you guys could join us. And any words before we start, Myra?
No, let's just get to it.
Okay. So on Friday, SCOTUS ruled to overturn Roe versus Wade. It was 6 justices to 3. And a lot of people are celebrating and a lot of people are upset at the ruling. This is 50 years in the making. The last time when Roe versus Wade was put into law was, I believe, in the 70s. And so it's been a long time coming for Christian conservatives that they can say that this is a victory that they.
I'm losing you, Rowley.
You're still.
Hello?
Can
Okay,
you?
there.
Okay. How did you take or how did you feel on Friday when you heard the news that the that SCOTUS had overruled Roe versus Wade?
I was very happy. It was something that we've been waiting for. A lot of people have been praying for it. The one thing that I wanted to clarify in this is that it gives it back to the states, correct?
Correct.
So it's not that they're uh, uh, what is it called, totally coming out against abortion, because there are some states where you are going to be able to have abortions. It's still They're still going to have it within our laws, but there are going to be the conservative states, as like Texas, where abortions are not going to be available. And
Right.
to me, I am more into giving the power or the pen back to the states, to the people, because it every state differs. Not every state has to do it as a federal to certain things. But
Right.
I was very happy with the decision.
You're very happy with the decision.
Mhm.
Um, as far as polling goes, when the American people are polled in in this uh, in this policy or in this ruling, Roe versus Wade enjoys a majority support from most Americans. Some polls have been even upwards to 80%, but 70%, and in other times high 60s. So how would you respond to the critique that this is a ruling by the minority on the majority, where basically six unelected officials get to make this kind of decision that's going to affect the majority? And how do you factor in the legitimacy of the Supreme Court?
You're kind of cutting off. What I would say is what I would say is that when it comes to the ruling to the Supreme Court goes with a constitution. That's what they take into mind, or that's what they take into their decisions. They go by the constitution. So to me, the Supreme Court is the ultimate court of the country. So I don't, I even when it comes to the presidential election, or when it comes to any type of election, the polling is not very reliable or dependable. So I go with what the decision has. And again, yes, it is a conservative court, but
Right.
it's a constitutional court as well.
Well, I mean, that's the argument that they make. So let me just address the whole polling issue. Is that when we're talking about one poll, right? It's easy to distrust any polls, depending on what side you're on. But the majority of polls, when you aggregate it, it shows that Roe versus Wade is very popular among Americans. I mean, I don't think that's I nobody I know argues otherwise. Even conservatives like Ben Shapiro and uh, and Tucker Carlson have they acknowledged this, right? So as far as the polling goes, um, I think it's understood that Roe versus Wade was supported among the majority of Americans. Now, when we talk about the Constitution, right? This is where we get squirrely, right? Because there are two different interpretations of the Constitution. One are by a group of people, usually liberals, who say that that it's a living, breathing document, right? That we're able to amend it over time as times change. As science progresses, technology with more knowledge, we should be
You're cutting off, Raleigh.
I'm gonna ask Bianca because I know she's watching. Is my audio coming through, or is the problem on my end, or is it only on Myra's end? If you could just leave a comment so I can know what's going on. But I'm gonna continue. You can hear me now.
I can hear you now.
It's on my end. She says it's on my end. Other than cutting the program, I don't know. I don't know how else to fix the audio problem. Is it so bad that we have to start over again? Um, Okay, so she says it's not that bad. So we'll continue. So like I was saying about the Constitution is that there's a couple of different ways to interpret it. Right? Is that some people view that it can change over time. Others say that no, we we have to adhere to it as it was quote unquote intended by the founder. So you have to read into intentions and what was happening at the time. For example, just real quick, I don't want to spend too long on this, but the Second Amendment is often argued that either the founders meant if the founders meant that by well regulated militia it was the citizens that it was either only the weapons that were available at the time, um or that includes all weapons. So there's either regulated to what was available at the time, or that it includes every single weapon up until today, which would include tanks and shoulder mounted RPGs, etc. So I mean, there's two different interpretations of it, but the religious part of the court, it's hard for me to believe that the Christians in the court, or that the Catholics in the court, like Kavanaugh and etc., that their religion wasn't the motivating factor in their decision, and they try to cover that with legalese and legal speak. Um,
I believe that beliefs in religions, whether you're in the court, whether you're in holding office, or even sometimes at a regular job, that is those are your values, and they do stand with whatever decision you make. When it comes to the court, that is some of the reasons why they get chosen, because of their standing and their beliefs, but also of their knowledge to the Constitution and where they stand. Are they going to abide by the Constitution is the ultimate thing.
right,
And I do believe that every living every living person has constitutional rights, and it goes beyond the womb. They have a constitutional right to the chance to live.
right, and you believe that. And so here's, I guess, let's get into let's get into the abortion debate, since we're gonna have it. Um, as I'm gonna outline later in my battle line. I grew up in a Christian community. Grew up in an evangelical church, right? And we were taught very simply that there's only two sides to this issue. You're either pro-life or pro-choice, right? And that obviously the pro-life team, like, we're the good guys, and the Democrats are they just hate babies and they want to murder babies, right? It wasn't only until I shed my religious background, and I just stopped believing that, I tried to understand the arguments that the pro-choice side was making. And this is a complicated issue to be whittled down to either you love babies or you hate babies, and we're just on the team that loves babies. So there was compromises to be made, because I think where the majority, well, like again, when polled, when where the majority of Americans stand, was that the American people aren't supportive of late term abortion, the extreme position on the left. And at the same time, the other says that life without a doubt begins at conception, and that and that abortions aren't allowed, or even in the early stages of a pregnancy, or again, or that contraception would be is an issue that violates your conscience and your religion, or that the plan B would be. These are the extreme positions. But it seems to me that now, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, a lot of the states are going to have the ability to even outlaw things like the Plan B pill or contraception. Clarence Thomas himself said that now all of these questions were open, and that all of the precedents and all of the previous court rulings are now open to challenge. What is your take? What is your take on the idea that, yes, it goes back to the states? You're right, but now the most extreme type of politicians, mainly in the South, are now going to impose their, what would be known as their, what is their religious beliefs when it comes to the arena of life,
That's
on
where the
on
people
everybody else.
that's where the people hold them accountable. That's how you choose your elections. That's how you get involved in an election, to choose the person that's going to represent you. And that is very important. A lot of people decide not to get involved, and that's what you're given, or that's what you decide to go with. But going back to where you came from, I came from a Catholic background. I am a Catholic background. I'm still a Catholic. I still go to church. We didn't talk much about abortion. I mean, I knew in my conscience it was wrong, but the way I grew up, it was more like, whatever anybody else does, that's none of my business. It's
Right.
not something that I would do. It's not for me to judge. My whole perspective changed when I had my daughter 14 years ago. She was born as a preemie at 7 months. In the pre-nic unit, there was babies that were smaller than her, and I saw them fight for their life. I saw them try to breathe, to stay alive. All those machines hooked up to them. So to see that this little baby, that this little child is fighting for their lives, and have somebody rip them apart into pieces, that is just something that's not right. I consciously made the decision to become a pro-life. I consciously made the decision to see that this little person was indeed a person with a beating heart, and with pain and the desire to live. What that person decides to grow up in or grow as, I mean, that's different. But I'm not one of these, and I'll say it here and I'll say it. I'm not one of these, like, every baby's beautiful. I love children. I'd rather have a dog than a child. But I know that I am going to take care of myself if I want to have a child. I know that as a woman, if I know the things that I need to do to prevent from being pregnant, and there's a lot of, the majority of abortions are women that get pregnant and don't want to have a child because they want to continue their way of life. I myself had very close friends that use abortion as a form of birth control, and that's wrong. You're killing a life so you can continue doing what you want to do, whether it's your career, whether it's partying, whether I don't have the money to support it. Well, you have a brain, and you have the power to decide how to protect yourself and not have a child.
Right. Now, the argument against that would be, well, you're talking about personal decision. What about all the other cases where there isn't a personal decision involved? For example, and I know these cases are in the minority, but the
Hmm.
fact is, if on if last Friday, if you were raped, if you were a 13-year-old girl, for example, and you were raped
Hmm.
and you had an abortion scheduled for Monday, well, that abortion is now illegal and
Well,
you
that is something that, like you said, it's a minor thing that happens, but there are cases where you can take that now and fight it to the state. Abortion is illegal, but let's look at the circumstances, and that is something that the right has been able to talk, but the left wants, they're not willing to just have that. They want everything or nothing, and
right. Well,
that's
listen,
what I've seen.
I'm not going to defend the left, but I know for a fact that the right isn't fighting for that exception. There's a senator, and I forget his name. I think he's from Texas. Um, who, when asked about rape, he basically said, "Hey, listen, it's God's will, and what are you going to do?" So and so yes, I completely get the point. As far as we know, these cases happen. They're in the minority of cases. I think less than 1% of cases, but nonetheless, they do happen.
I have a
And
friend that was raped and became pregnant of that rape,
right, so
and she decided
it
to have the baby.
right, so so these cases do happen, but the majority of women decide not to. Uh, and so what's the solution for that case? Because it can't just be fuck them.
No, I mean, I believe that it's a sad situation. There's counseling, there's other things that can be in place. But I am one that to me, is I am not going to make two victims out of one incident. Why would, I mean, what fault is it of the child?
Right.
It's not the child's fault.
Again, it's not the child's fault, but it's also not the woman's fault.
No, that's why
Um,
you're making two victims out of one.
Well, see, but then the argument is this: is that you believe that right off the bat that it is a human life. So do you give constitutional rights to that? You know, two,
The
3 week
child,
old fetus,
yeah.
the fetus. You give constitutional protection
Hmm.
to not.
Ah, you're breaking up again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so then I asked the question because I want to know like clearly exactly what it is you believe. So if you believe that this is a life, then you believe that any female in the past who's terminated a pregnancy has committed murder.
I believe that a child was murdered. Yes.
You believe that a child was murdered. So then
Hmm.
you support laws like in Louisiana that would jail mothers who have abortions and their doctors.
Um, the mother, if the mother is a victim, the mother is acting out of out of pain, out of something that happened to them, but the doctor consciously did it. The doctor should be reprimanded for committing the abortion.
No, but we're talking about murder because you believe it's murder. So we're not talking
Hmm.
about nobody gets reprimanded for murder. And if this is a life that we're talking about,
Yeah, the
and
doctor should
and
suffer the
right, and
consequences
you
for
believe
committing murder.
and the women should, so it should be women charged with murder, doctors as their accomplice.
The women, the women that are raped, it is very different because the emotions that go through a rape, the things that you do, it's kind of like homicide. You
Right.
committed the manslaughter or homicide. I don't know the legal terms, to be honest,
Right.
Raleigh.
Right. No, but
Um,
I'm not talking about women who were raped. I'm talking about a woman
Unknowingly
who
killing
has
a
an
child,
abortion who
yes,
let's say
yes.
at 5 weeks pregnant. That woman should be jailed.
If you're killing a life, if you're murdering a life, yes, then it's a murder.
Okay. Okay. Um.
You're
Again,
knowingly murdering a child.
right. We're going to agree to disagree, but I want to know what where your position is exactly on this, because at my end I don't agree that at that point that it is a life that is guaranteed constitutional rights.
Okay, you froze
Can
again.
you hear me now?
Yes.
That is, I don't know when life begins. I don't know, and biologists even themselves don't even agree when life begins. So we have here a religious versus science question, I guess you can say. And I could say that the scientist, and I side with the scientist, but I don't know, to be honest, when I could say that a life begins, let alone uh, give it constitutional rights, let alone punish another human being for what happens to that before the life begins. I understand that that might sound callous to some, but it is what it is. Nature is. I mean, these things aren't. Like I said, these things are complex, right?
Hmm.
Now, I don't agree. I agree with conservatives that at a certain point, it it is murder, and at a certain point, it is grotesque, and it's a horrible practice. Late stage abortions are abhorrent, in my opinion. But I had somebody on. Her name is Kelsey Walker. Maybe you've heard of her. She's an author, and I forget the name of her book, but she had a late term abortion at about 8 months, and she didn't want to have it. But the doctors told her that her baby had what's known as brittle bone syndrome. In other words, that her bones were so weak, I suppose her bones were so brittle that any touch to those bones would break them, and that the baby, upon birth, would die a a very painful death, or that and that this more than likely could affect Kelsey's life, right? And she came from a Catholic home, and her parents were
Okay, you're freezing again.
okay. What's
Yeah. I
what?
don't like all of a sudden it freezes, but then you correct it when I tell you. I don't know
Oh,
what is it
no,
that
I
you
mean,
do.
I think it's just the Wi-Fi signal. I've never had this problem before, but okay. And so, what's the last thing you heard in the story?
That she came from a Catholic family.
Okay. Go. So I got everything. So, like I said, she came from her parents who were very pro-life, and when consulting with her doctors, they all decided to go to have a late-term abortion. Um,
There
and
have there has been plenty of stories like that
right.
where the doctors have given women this diagnosis of their babies, and a lot of them have come out, wrong. A lot of them are right, a lot of them are wrong. But who are we to decide the fate of the child?
Well,
We are holding the life of a child in our hands and decide to end the life because of the condition of the child. That I mean, there are cases where babies have Down syndrome, and the doctors give the mothers the choice to end the baby's life because they have Down syndrome, and it's it's not right. It's wrong. I mean, we are playing God. We are playing with a, we are becoming the executioner of the life, simply because the life is not going to have the same quality of life or has a certain condition. And that to me is wrong. I mean, should we murder patients that come out with a terminal illness because it's going to affect their quality of life?
Oh, but I think these are two different questions, because the person with a terminal illness already has a lived experience. They're have lived a life. They're here on Earth, but
Hmm.
that's kind of getting away from what I wanted to ask you, because in this case, you're if you
I can't hear
you
you.
yourself,
I
um,
can't hear you.
so like I said, shouldn't you have the option to save your own life? I mean,
I
there's
was
there's
given
two
the option
lives.
when my daughter was born. When my
Right.
daughter, like I told you, she was a high risk pregnancy, and the doctor and I told my husband, if at the time, if my life, or if it's my life or the baby's life, you save the baby's life. As a mother, I put the life of my child first, and I did have a son before. So my
Right.
son was going to be left without a mother. But when you become a mother, you put the life of the child first over yours. That's what a mother is about. A mother's nurturing. A mother protects her child. A
Right.
mother doesn't, a mother puts their life on the line for that child.
Right. But you can't legislate that. So you had the option, right?
Mm-hmm.
You chose to go that route. Now, uh, but shouldn't somebody, because again, every case is different, shouldn't somebody who thinks that their life might be at risk have the option to save their own life? Or
Not
does
when it comes to killing another life.
or in your mind, does the unborn life take precedent?
The unborn life has, they don't have anybody there to advocate for them. That's a problem with it. And that life should have an option. As a mother, you should protect your child. I mean, that's,
What if the mother has another child that she
I
would
like,
then,
yeah.
yeah, that she would then that leave alone in the world to
Mm-hmm.
protect the life? I mean, what I'm trying to drive at is that it's not cut and dry. You're neither right or wrong for making the decision that you made. Like she wasn't right in her mind. She did the right thing in trying to save her own life, to protect herself and her children who were already alive. You know, uh, my point is that the options should be available, and there should be strict guidelines, and there should be strict oversight on what quality and they should
You're
be
cutting
decided
off again. Mm-hmm.
and they should be decided by medical professionals, not politicians, not bureaucrats.
Medical professionals who, many of them, I mean, there are medical professionals, but at a lot of times, as abortionists don't care about the baby's lives. We've seen them, as they're very callous, very uncaring about the life of a child. But again, medical professionals have made plenty of mistakes when it comes to unborn babies, or the babies where they're still in the womb, diagnosing them with things that are not yet there, because I mean, it is hard to diagnose a baby from the womb, and there has been mistakes that have been made.
Right. Okay. So I guess on Roe versus Wade, that's as far as we're gonna go for now. Would you like to take this opportunity to let us know what your battle line is today?
I want to talk about, it goes back to Roe versus Wade. Um, there has been politicians. We have Maxine Waters, we have Chuck Schumer, we have AOC hitting the streets, asking for violence, asking for the streets to be taken over, to fight that this is now a war zone, that they're going to go after the justices. We had Chuck Schumer actually call out violence against the justices before even the decision was made. So we have that, and we have the hearings of January 6th. We have them blaming President Trump with what happened on January 6th. We have guys in jail for 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 rallying, taking the streets, and what happened. What makes it too different? Why are we going to go after all these politicians, all these elected officials that have called on Antifa, have called on all this leftist group to take the streets and riot, because that's what they're doing. They're rioting, they're into businesses, they are hurting innocent bystanders who were there celebrating the decision of what was made of to abolish Roe versus Wade. Because just like we spoke right now, there's people in different positions, different side of the aisles, which is always going to be in history. We're always going to have, stand for something where we have an opposition, but nobody should be attacked. Nobody should be hurt for voicing their opinion. But yet we have the left elected officials kind of encouraging this. They are encouraging it, not kind of, they are, deliberately encouraging this. If this were the other way around, we already saw what happened. We have guys in prison, like I said, and we have uh, President Trump, in they're asking to indict him because of he didn't ask for violence. He said, we're going to fight this. We're going to fight the election fraud. And are we going to hold this elected officials like Maxine Waters, Chuck Schumer, AOC accountable for what's going on the streets right now? That's what my battle line is.
So you're saying that in your mind, you think there is an equivalence between what happened on January 6th and the protests that are happening outside the Supreme Court? I don't understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
I mean the thing that these elected officials are encouraging it. They're pushing this people to cause havoc on the streets. And it didn't only happen with Roe versus Wade. It happened a summer ago, like the summer of 2020, the summer of last year, and nobody was held accountable. When January 6th happened, which we've talked about it was one incident, one day. A lot of people were held accountable and are still sitting in prisons.
And they should be, but like,
No,
which is what I'm saying. It's not to say that January 6th was an incident, and then to try to compare that to some
I'm losing you again.
calling an incident.
I'm losing you.
To call January 6th an incident and to compare that to the protests that are happening outside the Supreme Court. Has there been violence outside the Supreme Court?
There has been violence in Arizona outside the courts. There has been violence in California. There has been violence, I believe, outside of the Supreme Court in DC, where people are being attacked. And it's not only that protest, but I mean, this is just one of many where there was violence in federal buildings.
And
And
and so I guess so you're against politicians after a decision like this, speaking out against things, like going to the Supreme Court and protesting. Like I guess
they can protest, but I mean, they're asking for the words that they're using. They're encouraging an insurrection. They're encouraging the people to get angry, to go and attack other people, to take the streets. And if you hear the words that they're saying, they're calling out people to act upon it, and you know how people are going to act. The same thing can be said of President Trump when he did a speech. He didn't incite violence, but they interpreted it as him inciting violence.
but you don't agree that he incited violence, right?
No, I don't agree that he did.
But you think the Democrats are inciting violence. I guess I don't understand.
I'm saying that why not treat one like the other? If we're gonna let the Democrats do it and get away with it, I mean, I'm asking is for them to be treated the same. If we're gonna be saying that President Trump incited violence, then we can really clearly say that AOC and Maxine Waters incited violence, which in the past they have. Kick them while they're
Wouldn't you?
down, and
But don't you see the difference, Myra? The
you're breaking out again. I can't hear you.
of Roe versus Wade. You still can't hear me?
Now I just heard the end of it.
Okay, let me try to hurry up and get this in before it breaks up again. The overturning of Roe versus Wade itself angers a lot of people. You don't need politicians to be able to, I mean, to incite people. That itself is going to get a lot of people out on the streets. You saw that as soon as it happened, even before AOC showed up. There was already a huge group of thousands of protesters who had aligned or who had gathered outside the Supreme Court. When the leak of the decision happened, there was protesters who had gathered outside, the Supreme Court and
Yeah,
and the state courts.
yeah, they
Uh,
have every right to be out there speaking against it.
they have
But
every right. They have every right to.
yeah,
But the overturning of Roe versus Wade actually happened. What Donald
hmm
Trump was getting people on the Stop the Steal, that didn't happen. I mean, these are two totally different
That
situations.
that did
I
happen.
don't
We
know
do
how.
believe that the election was
Well,
stolen.
I
And
know
when
you believe it, but the evidence just doesn't suggest it.
okay, when we go back to Roe versus Wade, yes, it's going to create protesters and it's going to create people out there being angry. But the politicians shouldn't encourage it, shouldn't push it. They should be acting more responsible and asking for peaceful protest or
Yes,
peaceful, demonstrations, and they
right.
didn't.
Well,
They incited more anger into the people.
well,
And
there.
when have you ever been to a rally? Have you ever been to a protest in that magnitude of crowds?
Yes,
So you know the emotions that take place.
of
You know
course.
that the emotions that happen. So when you have somebody on a microphone inciting not only one person, this wasn't only AOC. It was also Maxine Waters and other. I think I saw Talid also there, Rashida Talid or whatever her. I don't. I'm not
Yeah,
very familiar
Rashida
with her
Tlaib.
name. That's her. Okay, I said it
Yeah.
right. So they were out there speaking and getting the people wound up and angry about it. So
Right.
it's the emotions are already high as it is.
Well, you sound like you're just agreeing with me. I mean, you're making the argument I was making last time that we were talking about January the 6th. It sounds like you copied my argument down point for point.
No.
Politicians
Hmm.
do. Politicians are responsible. They do have responsible for riling people up. Right now, the difference in January the 6th is that in court, in testimony, Trump supporters who are being tried have said directly that the reason why they were there was because Trump ordered them there. I can pull up testimony after testimony. So they felt like they were getting direct orders from the president, right? And protesting and fighting outside of the Supreme Court is not the same as trying to stop an
Trump
election.
Trump asked supporters to be out
Hold
there.
on,
He
but
did.
right, but I have to say that one more time. That getting into a fight outside of the Supreme Court over Roe versus Wade is not the same as invading the nation's capital and trying to stop an election. You do see the difference, right?
The people were led into the Capitol. The doors were being opened. The barricades were being moved by Capitol Police.
Right, because if they had left them there, they would have been dead.
I have been there before, and emotions were high, and the security was stronger then in November and December than it was in January.
Right.
Trump ordered more guards. Trump ordered the National Guard to be out there because we knew that
Three
the people
hours,
was going to be.
3 hours
He had
after it happened.
requested. No, he had requested before.
No, he did
He
not.
had requested before. Yes, sir.
They were begging him during
Hmm.
the actual riots and during the actual insurrection. They begged him. Mike Pence was the one that had to sign off on getting the National Guard into because Trump was sitting on his ass, wasn't doing a damn thing about it. That is a fact.
No, they were asking for additional support before it happened because they knew that there was going to be a lot of people.
No, I think
And they knew that the amount of people that went in November and that went in December, and after, that president was going to be there, so they should have been more protection.
am I cutting off?
No.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay, let's
And
go to
so
your battle line.
okay, yeah, because I think people already know our positions on January the 6th. All right, so here's what I want to take a look at. I want to take a look at the role that organized religion had in Friday SCOTUS decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. And unlike a lot of other observers, I'm in the unique position, Myra, of having argued at one time vigorously for the pro-life side during my misspent college years, and then having changed my opinion to agree with both sides on some key points. And I guess we'll get to that in your response. I mean, but first, I want to say that I do understand how most pro-lifers feel this week because I do remember feeling at one point in my life that Democrats hated babies and that Democrats wanted to murder babies. And I do remember the arguments I made against the left in the debates I had in college. And I know at that time I really did believe that. And if I was still religious today, and if I believed that way today, I too would be taking a victory lap and thinking that a grand moral evil had just been terminated. But during that time in college, I was under the influence of evangelical Christianity and the information pipeline passed down from the conservative media complex into the church. To think now that such a complex issue like life and abortion and questions like where does life start and where does life end could be whittled down to two teams: team we love babies and team they hate babies, was the first skin that I had to shed. Now, when I stopped going to church, Myra, and listening to their partners and talk radio, etc., I realized this was always the plan, to make you feel like you are the good guys. One college professor asked me, "Can you even describe what conception means?" And truthfully, I was clueless. I know I had heard Rush Limbaugh talking about this. Like, what's the talking point again? But I knew nothing. And the people that did, the scientists, I was told hated my God. So why would they listen to them? So why would I listen to them? They were Team Blue, and that team hates babies. It was years later when I lost my religion and I stopped seeing everybody who didn't accept my God as enemies that I began to actually listen to the arguments. You mean my pastor doesn't have a biology degree, but he knows where life begins because the Bible tells him? Hmm. Now, I know that sounds dismissive, but hear me out. In the year 2022, we know a lot more about biology than we've ever known because of science. So we should be able to answer clearly that question: when does life begin? Right? But not so fast. Because people like world renowned biologist Scott Gilbert says, and I quote, "I really can't tell you when personhood begins, but I can say with absolute certainty that there's no consensus among scientists. Some scientists will say it begins at fertilization. Some scientists will say it starts at week 24 to 28 when you see the beginning of the human specific EEG, and saying if we're willing to say that death is the loss of the EEG, perhaps personhood is the acquisition of the EEG," end quote. So in other words, it's complicated. And so just like the beginning of time and the universe and other life's most important questions, we think we have an idea, but nobody really knows. So anybody that tells you they're sure when life begins is trying to sell you something. And in politics, they usually are. But there's are some things we do know for sure, like the number of mothers dying due to Friday's decision will increase. We know that. That is a fact. And here's where somebody's watching might say, yes, but that happens only in a minority of cases. Therefore, will increase. Number four, poverty will undoubtedly increase. Since the wealthy will be able to get abortions anyway, no matter what the law says, it's the impoverished women who now don't have the option. And wait till they come after your contraception and day after pill, because they said they would. Clarence Thomas said as much. And number five, malicious prosecutions will increase. In Texas, the state government is already employing secret police type tactics where they get your neighbor to snitch on you if you have an abortion or want to cross state lines to get one. In Louisiana, a bill is being proposed to jail would be mothers and their doctors for an abortion. These are things we know will happen. Is that really the country you want to live in? Is this the kind of authoritarian big government society you want? So, congratulations, evangelicals and conservatives. You got what you wanted for 50 years. But please remember that life outside the womb is just as important in God's eyes as the life inside the womb you fought for. Remember that when you go out and vote for, then defend and make excuses for politicians who vote for cuts to the free school lunch program, like all the Republicans who just voted last week for $80 billion cuts to the program because of deficits, while at the same time voting for almost 900 billions in military budgets, which included billions more for Ukraine. Pro-life inside the womb, pick yourself up by the bootstraps outside the womb. Or like the Republicans, including Chip Roy out of Austin, and staunch pro-life advocate Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said on Friday about Roe being overturned, quote, "It's a miracle, but just weeks ago voted against a bill that would help women and children on federal assistance have access to more formula brand options to help impoverished women through the national baby formula shortage. Pro life inside the womb is not just about abortion. Look at all the social programs proposed. Look at the lives that these cuts affect, babies and women, while at the same time voting for historic increases for military contract spending and Ukraine spending. This isn't a game. Being pro life isn't about holding up a sign in front of the Capitol crying about how you're saving all the babies, who you're then voting to directly hurt by the same policies you advocate for and defend. You can't be pro life only to own the libs. There's going to be consequences, and I hope you're ready for the America that will result from this. And this is where we will find out, are you really pro life? So, Myra, I hope all of that came through.
Some of it. I didn't want to interrupt, but some of it was going off and on.
Okay, so what's your reaction to what I just said? You can't be pro life inside the womb and then vote for motherfuckers who advocate policies that are going to hurt the same people that you fought for inside the womb. Explain that one to me.
I do, but I mean, they're not perfect. Our people are not perfect, and they're human, and there are wrong decisions that are made. I
Just like
think we
mothers,
need
right?
people.
Just like
I'm sorry.
mothers. Just like mothers.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not going to kill a baby over my bad decision.
But babies die
But,
due to
huh?
policies. But real life human beings sometimes
Mm-hmm.
die. I mean, when we're talking about the national the formula shortage, I mean, I can only think of one being, one citizen that drinks baby formula.
Mm-hmm.
Those are babies. So
What else?
I don't understand the rationale. Explain the rationale.
I've talked to you about this before. I don't know what's in the bills. I'm not one that sits down and reads the bills. I would need to see what else was in the bills, because we know that a lot of things are being put into bills to pass them. They can be a baby formula, or like the one you said about, I know that they were going to cut funding on the lunch for the school kids if we didn't pass the transgender or some other type of education. So there's always some strings attached, and it shouldn't be. I mean, a bill should be a bill. If it was the one for the baby formula, I hope there was no strings attached in order to pass it. And if they
Right, but
voted against it, yeah, they should be called out for voting against it.
that's also politics. I mean, they're called poison pills. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they'll put in things that aren't popular, and then they'll, under the umbrella of, like, let's say, you know baby formula shortage, or trying to, but that's politics. I
Yeah,
mean,
and it's wrong, but
both
it's wrong.
both
And
sides
and
do
and
it.
I mean, I know both sides do it,
And at
but
the end of the, and at
not
the
when
end of
it
the
comes to
day,
the lives of the children.
right, right. And at the end of the day, there's still consequences from policies. But I mean, let's not pretend like that's the only issue that Republicans have voted for cuts on. Every Republican budget that comes across whenever they're in power always calls for cuts to social programs. They were the ones that were staunchly opposed to the extension of the child tax credit under the first Biden stimulus. And we know, because the data is in, that program uh, helped pull a lot of kids out of poverty, out of starving mode. So, like, again, like, we know this is going on. We know it's a part of the Republican doctrine and the part of the Republican narrative to cut social programs. We understand this. And we know simultaneously that forcing women who are largely in the impoverished side, a lot of minority women, because rich women, it doesn't matter whether you live in a southern state that bans abortion. You're going to get your abortion anyway,
What
because you have the resources, right? So this
the,
largely affects impoverished women.
there needs to be more social programs when it comes to education, to the women. There has to be, especially the young women. And am I talking sex ed? No, no, I'm talking about the consequences. I'm talking about what happens to, when you have sex. Like we talked last week, I mean, especially in our community, it sucks. Sex education sucks. You have to go out there and learn it on yourself. And
Right.
that's why we have a lot of young girls becoming pregnant at the age that they are, because a lot of parents don't want to talk about it. And it's not up to the schools to teach it. But I do believe that we need to educate the parents in how to go and talk to their children, to the young girls, about the risk of having sex, not only pregnancy but disease. And there needs to be help when it comes to local. I think that we need to do a lot of things more in a state and local, in a local way, instead of relying on a federal government.
Right. The only issue with that is that, I mean, to a large extent, you support a party here in Texas who's not for those things. The Republicans here in Texas that are running don't support the
Hmm.
the extension of these types of programs. We just talked about last week how Governor Abbott just cut millions of dollars of
Yeah.
available funding for mental health institutions, and yet a day or 2 or 3 days later gets on stage and is crying about how we need more funding for mental health facilities.
And
I
that's
mean,
why we don't look within the parties. We look within the person. What is that person going to represent? What is that person going to help us in? We need to stop looking at the party to save the people, because the party's only saving themselves at the end of
right,
the day. We need to look at the candidate that's going to pass the policies to save our local communities. When we elect people, we need to see what have they done for our local community. Have they done anything to uplift it, or did they just start doing it because they were going to run for office? How much have they been involved with their neighbor? And a lot of these politicians that we're sending to DC don't even know what's happening in their local community, don't even know what the colonias are going through or need. And that's not right. They're not representing the people. And yes, I'm talking about both Republicans and Democrats, because honestly, I don't know if I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. I am going to vote for that person that's going to help the community and that has been there for the community. When it came to District 15, I was willing to help Ruben Ramirez because I knew that he was an educator. I knew that he had been a veteran and had done for the community. So it's time to look beyond the party line and look for the people that are going to help the people, and not themselves and their party, and not be a mouthpiece of the party.
right. That's one thing that we can agree on.
Mhm.
And you said it better than I probably could, to be honest. That was really well said. It's not
Thank you.
about parties, and it's not about unfortunately ideology. But in this case, in this instance, we do know that if you're looking for any kind of help, we know it's not going to come from the government, and we know
Mm-mm.
and we definitely know it's not going to come in a few of the southern states that we mentioned. And so, with that being said, that was my battle line. It's a call out to the Christian conservatives. If you're pro life in the womb, you got to be pro life outside the womb too.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It doesn't only end when the baby's born. We need to advocate for the children. And like I said, I'm not a kid person, but I'll help children.
Well, speaking of kids, my youngest one just woke up and is looking right at me, and that dude can cause some havoc. We're at about 53 minutes. Is there any last words that you would want to say?
Um, no, I mean, the only last words that I have is to keep, I mean, I know we stand in different lines, but just keep praying for our nation, keep praying for this decision that was made for Roe versus Wade. And like Rowley says, it doesn't end, the fight doesn't end when the baby's born, it continues. Do not advocate only for the child in the womb, but also for the children that need it, those kids in the low poverty area. Go out there and volunteer and help.
And on that note, we end in agreement. How about that? All right,
That's a
everybody.
positive note.
That's right. Thanks for tuning in, Myra. Always a pleasure.
Likewise.
I am RC3, and we'll see you guys next week.